What's going on, everyone? Luca here, back with another video. So this is going to be like a 2-in-1 video. I'm first going to talk about the Raptors-Knicks game because that just ended, and then I also want to get into what CJ McCollum recently said on the Toronto Raptors that has a lot of people talking, as the Toronto Raptors continue to make headlines for all of the wrong reasons, it seems. But let's first start with Raptors-Knicks. This was one of the most entertaining games of the season. This was a crazy game, went down to the wire, went in overtime, and Brunson almost had a chance to win it there with the three. Luckily, he missed. The Toronto Raptors escaped New York with a huge win, 123-121. As you look at the Raptors, they are now 4 games under 500. They snapped the Knicks winning streak, which is always great anytime you can ruin the Knicks winning streak if you are the Raptors. And you look at this one, Scottie Barnes, another great game for him. In this wild season, guys, that's been very bizarre and confusing, I think we can all agree on one thing. Scottie Barnes isn't going anywhere, and I love that he's returning to form, and we've seen him now string together a couple of very solid performances. So I love how Scottie Barnes is starting to come along here, and as long as Scottie Barnes is on this Raptors team, you got to be feeling good as a Raptors fan. Pascal Siakam had 20 points in this one. OG had 10, but he did hit some huge threes in overtime. He hit his first couple of threes of the game in OT. Couldn't have come at a better time. Gary Trent Jr. had 18. And then Fred VanVleet, he's been talked about a lot, and a lot of people have been going back and forth on Fred VanVleet a ton this season, myself included. Fred VanVleet, I mean, he did have a very good game. He had 33 points, 8 assists, and he had 5 rebounds. So he showed up, and it's just been such an inconsistent year for Fred. It's like one moment he has a bad game, the next moment he does that. But as far as this one went against the Knicks, can't say too many bad things about Fred. Although he did have a very bad foul late in the game. Luckily, Brunson missed the free throw. I didn't really quite understand what Fred was doing there, especially when it was tied game. The shot clock was off, and then he did chuck up a 3, but luckily Scottie Barnes was right there. And by the way, Scottie Barnes, I forgot to mention, he was all over the offensive glass in this one. So like I mentioned, guys, it's very bizarre and confusing. Raptors season continues. It's like they'll win a game, then they'll lose a couple, then they'll win a couple, and it's like, where does this team stand right now? Is this team going to make major changes at the deadline? Is this team going to rebuild at the deadline? Is this team going to retool at the deadline? Or is this team just going to stand pat? Your guess is as good as mine at this point. I really don't know what this thing can turn into, which direction this thing is going into. I did say, though, in previous videos, whatever the Raptors decide, they just got to stick with it, or else you're going to find yourself in no man's land. So all in all, Raptors get a big win against the Knicks, but this team is still on the outside looking in. That is the reality. And now I want to talk about something that has been getting a lot of attention lately, and it is CJ McCollum. His recent comments on the Toronto Raptors on his show, the CJ McCollum Show. And he was one of the latest people to weigh in on Toronto's situation. Now I'm going to play the clip. This is what he had to say.
But I think in terms of what they need or what they're lacking, something's going to happen. I don't know what. There's rumblings about certain players on the team not being happy and due to tampering. I can't speak to that, but I think they're going to move someone at some point.
I'll put the link to the full pod down below. A lot of people are upset with CJ McCollum for putting the Raptors' dirty laundry out there for everybody. You got CJ McCollum, who, by the way, is the president of the National Basketball Players Association. That's the fine line with this new media. It's like, it's great for the fans to hear what the players have to say from their perspective, going through it all, but at the same time, this is stuff you probably don't want to air out there. Now, what CJ McCollum said, a lot of it could be just stirring the pot, trying to get ratings. And the other side of it is there could be some truth to this, because at the end of the day, CJ McCollum, he is well respected and he's well connected to these players. And if I just had to guess who CJ McCollum could be talking about here, I mean, 2 guys come to mind. The first being Fred VanVleet. Obviously, Fred VanVleet has had a very inconsistent season. There's the talks of him shutting down that contract, which he later denied this past offseason. So Fred VanVleet, I think, is one of the guys that CJ is talking about. And CJ McCollum follows Fred VanVleet on Instagram, whatever that means to you. And then the other is Gary Trent Jr., another guy who CJ McCollum follows on Instagram. And of course, CJ did play with Gary in Portland, and Gary Trent Jr. has had to deal with a lot this season as well. I mean, he was called out by Nick Nurse. Obviously, he had to deal with the benching situation. So I think those are the guys in particular that CJ is talking about. We know that the Raptors are going to have to make some major decisions. And despite them winning this game against the Knicks, it doesn't change much about the trade speculation, I think, that is going on right now. I think if the Raptors are going to make a trade, those are the two likeliest of candidates, because as reported last week, a league source told Michael Grange of Sportsnet that the Raptors could set the market for this year's trade deadline, which is now only a few short weeks away. And then NBA insider Mark Stein added that while he didn't expect a broad fire sale for the Raptors, he did mention Gary Trent Jr.'s name as well as being, and I quote, undeniably available. And then he went on to say it would take lots to pry either Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby away. I don't think Siakam's going anywhere. I don't think Anunoby's going anywhere. I certainly don't think Barnes is going anywhere. So looking at the starters of this team, the two culprits I think would be Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. I really think behind the scenes, Masai Ujiri and company are keeping their options open if they can potentially pull something off via trade with regards to those two players. And you look at it, it does make sense. I mean, let's first start with Gary Trent Jr. There is a lot of sense behind the idea of the Raptors moving on from him, as he has a $18.6 million player option this offseason. And if Trent elects to decline that player option, which he most likely will, he could enter unrestricted free agency, and the Raptors could run the risk of losing him for nothing. And then you look at the whole Fred VanVleet situation. He has a player option for the 2023-2024 season on an initial 4-year contract. And VanVleet has the option of hitting free agency this summer should he choose to. So if the Raptors did elect to trade VanVleet, it would allow the Raptors to focus more on the growth of Scottie Barnes, and it would allow Barnes to have more freedom and a larger role in the offense. And it would give the Raptors a lot more options as to their money they're able to spend in the future, as they, of course, I would think, have plans of signing Pascal Siakam to a major contract extension. There's been a lot of talk recently, and obviously the Raptors are stuck in this weird middle. Yeah, this is making for some very interesting narratives. Let me know what you have to say about this, guys. Let me know what you make of all of this. Do you think there are major changes coming for this Raptors team, or do you think nothing's going to happen, as the Raptors could very well still turn this thing around? They got a big matchup coming up against the Bucks, and then their schedule is going to get a lot more difficult. So the Raptors sitting at 4 games under 500, I think it's safe to say there is very little room for error from here on out. But that is it for me, guys. Just wanted to put in my 2 cents. This is Luca with another video. Hit the like on the video. It does help it a ton. And please subscribe to the channel for more Raptors and NBA content. And I will catch you all again in the next video.